Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the moment of truth. It seems that the hype train for Kamala Harris is sputtering as it tries to leave the station. For many years now, ever since my groundbreaking video, The Deadly Deception of Kamala Harris, way back in 2017, I laid out years before anyone else was even talking about this woman that her plan was to duplicate Barack Obama's path to the White House. She would start by trying to win a Senate seat like Obama did, and then she would use her position in the Senate to get into a bunch of meaningless spitting contests with Trump administration officials during Senate hearings, just like Obama did. And then she would use the white media attention that she got for herself to raise her own profile and try to position herself as taking on the Republicans' administration before she even announced her candidacy. Which is exactly what Barack Obama did. Everybody saw him arguing with W's administration officials during meaningless Senate hearings years before he actually announced, inevitably, that he was going to run for the presidency. And this after the fact that when he was running for the Senate, he said that he would finish his entire term. He was already showing everybody exactly what his word was worth. So with Joe Biden having inevitably jumped out of the race, the question is, who wants to get on the Kamala Harris hype train? Well, it seems Nancy Pelosi decided to pass on a ticket. She's saying that the Democrats need to have an open nomination contest at the convention. And now we can add Barack Obama's name to the list of people who aren't just endorsing Kamala Harris off the bat, but rather calling for a nomination contest. So now you got the former leader of the Congressional Democrats and House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, being echoed by our former President Barack Obama. And speaking of former presidents, apparently Bill and Hillary Clinton have endorsed Harris already. So why all this reluctance to just say that Kamala Harris is the VP and she's going to be our horse and everybody needs to get behind her? Because they can see she isn't a horse built to run. The same political weaknesses that caused her 2020 campaign to implode on takeoff are still there. They haven't improved. And worse, her record as VP has been to stumble and stagger from one PR disaster to the next. You can't think of anything really good to say about Kamala Harris during the last 4 years. That's why the Biden administration spent so much time trying to keep her under wraps. Even he knew what a mistake it was to let this woman actually get in front of the cameras. Every time she opens her mouth, she has to immediately issue some sort of clarification or retraction or what have you. She's not ready for prime time. And yet she's the person who most Americans would assume is supposed to get the nomination from the Democrats because she's the vice president. Kamala Harris was never supposed to be on the ticket in the first place. Biden needed a way to maintain black voter support, especially black women, so he made Harris his VP. Just like Barack Obama needed to make sure that he didn't lose any white male support from the Democrats, and that's why he had a white guy as his VP. But the dirty little secret that the Democrats don't like to talk about is that Biden wasn't supposed to be the nominee in 2020 either. Democrats spent all their time fundraising for the leadership instead of constantly cultivating a field of new presidential contenders. They had to go with Biden because he was the only person who had anything approaching name recognition. All the rest of these folks, they simply hadn't had enough time to be built up. Democrats don't build up their next class of leaders because the DNC leadership are all scared of having to give rise to any political rivals. That's their big fear, not that the Republicans are going to win, but that they, the Democratic leadership, might lose their own spots. The Democratic leadership in D.C. simply wants people to support their program and be good soldiers. But what that means is there's only a small handful of the same predictable insiders who are actually being groomed to be real competitors for the presidency, and there's nobody at the state level who's being set up to run for anything. The Democratic leadership wants it to just be them and their pals, and everybody else just needs to shut up and focus on doing the DNC's bidding at the state level and hope that they get some federal money as their reward for their unconditional obedience. There's also the same old political insider power games. Big names like Clinton and others withhold their support unless and until their chosen nominee agrees to give them something, or to otherwise reciprocate. And Obama's most likely doing the exact same thing. You can certainly imagine what that would take the form of. Now, you need to make one of my daughters an undersecretary of state or something. They need to have a Trump's plum assignment when it comes to one of these foreign service offices somewhere, Britain or something like that. Or make Michelle the commerce secretary. That's the kind of game that we got Barack Obama and others playing. You can get their endorsement, you just can't get it for free.
Yeah, Lindsay, well, earlier today I spoke to a senior House Democrat who had just spoken to Vice President Harris. And during that call, I am told, the vice president said that she did not want a coronation to the nomination. The coronation part is essentially that she wants to be seen as securing the nomination on her own merit, securing the nomination by getting the support of the delegates and those pledged delegates that President Biden has, and by essentially saying that she can consolidate her support. And we've already seen momentum surrounding the vice president. We've seen the momentum when you see the Congressional Black Caucus and other really top Emily's List and other top organizations, Democratic stakeholders who are part of that crucial foundation for any Democratic presidential run. She can get the support from Black voters in crucial battleground states, and his Latino voters in crucial battleground states. Those are all core constituents that are part of the Biden coalition that she needs to win in November.
Kamala Harris has allegedly said that she doesn't want her nomination to be a coronation, that she actually wants to show that she can get the nomination and not have to have it handed to her. Now, considering that every single job that this woman's ever had since her days of being a plaything for low-down Willie Brown was the sole result of it having to be handed to her, she sounds more than a little strange suddenly talking about wanting to get something on her own. This is something she's never done in her entire freaking life. Not to mention, when you got as flawed a candidate as Kamala Harris, you really don't want to have a whole bunch of time being wasted on her having to arm wrestle with people for the nomination. The Democrats have little time as it is to actually try to extol the virtues of a President Kamala Harris. Having to have her argue against other people may not be the best way for her to prove it, but still, when it comes to politics, it's all about the fighting. That's what gets people to watch, like professional wrestling. Kamala Harris is an invention of the California political machine. All of the political offices she's ever held were selections, not elections. Kamala Harris does not want a nomination contest, no matter what she may be saying. The problem, of course, is you got people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama saying that they do, and she has to show that she's not scared of that. The reality, however, is she saw what happened 4 years ago when she actually was forced to have to compete for the presidency. She got crushed almost immediately. What she wants is for this to be an undeniable certification of her fitness for office. And they actually had the nerve to mention the Congressional Black Talkers as being some sort of boost to her would-be presidential hopes, that they're the base of the party. Those clowns are self-interested social climbers and increasingly irrelevant. If they were relevant, then where the hell were they 4 years ago when Kamala Harris was running for office? So the white media is just mentioning the same old safe Negroes who they know can be counted on to say the right things, or at the very least, they've been trained by massa not to say the wrong things. She can get the support of black voters. Oh, you mean the same way she got all that black support 4 years ago when she began her campaign at HBCU, then went on to get humiliated in the debates, including in Detroit, and to lose every single primary she was in until she slinked off in humiliation with her tail between her legs? You mean like that? Black voters are not with Kamala Harris because she's not with us. If the only thing you bring to the table is that you claim to have a requisite amount of melanin and you got some do-nothing endorsements from the Congressional Black Talkers, well, that's not an asset, that's a liability. Her reputation is horrible because most black people have family members out in California, so we know what kind of dirt she was doing against black San Franciscans and Californians when she became Attorney General. And on top of that, there's a black media out here who's making sure that black people know what the score is. We ain't gotta wait until she runs for office and she pops up and who the heck is this? I began beating the drum about Kamala Harris 7 years ago, back when she was running for the Senate. It was obvious to me what she was trying to do, and that being the case, it was also obvious that the Democratic leadership would look at her as being a useful idiot. They would try to position her to be an heir apparent to Obama, or at the very least, she could perhaps be somebody waiting in the wings just in case. And we see that's how it's played out. Kamala Harris's reputation precedes her, and it's not a good one, and the white media knows it. They're struggling just to find anything good to say about this woman. Shouldn't they be able to laud all of her accomplishments, all of the value that she brings, all of the things that she's done? They can't. They can't tell you anything that she's done, other than to trip over her own tongue. The hype train is sputtering indeed and about to derail before it even leaves the station, but there's not many people on the train anyway. And the train's not moving very fast either. This is more of the white media trying to conjure magic, trying to invent reality out of whole cloth by warping the public mind through the use of relentless propaganda. There's no tsunami of support for Kamala Harris, no tidal wave of young people or anyone else who looks at her as being some kind of rock star. She's just a basic political operative. The same old entitled empty suit who thinks that they're owed something because they played the game, paid their dues to the party bosses, and now it's time for them to get their payback. This may well be nothing more than a confidence-building exercise by the DNC on their part. For those who are perpetual skeptics, what if they actually won a nomination contest so as to solidify that Harris was nominated by the party and not just chosen by a handful of DNC leaders? Well, as we saw with Bernie Sanders, the Democrats have their so-called superdelegates that they use during the primaries to make sure that if you don't have the golden nod from the party leadership, then it will be all but impossible for you to gain enough delegates at the state level to win even one primary. And I'm sure their convention works along the same lines. The Democrats are, in fact, the originators of the political machines. If you take a look at Chicago and New York, those were Democrat operations there, with Boss Tweed in New York and Boss Cermak in Chicago. And sure, the Republicans do the exact same kind of things, but they haven't refined it to a science like the Democrats have, and they don't have that kind of long-standing tradition like the Democrats do either. My point is, the nomination is going to go to whomever the party leadership wants it to go to, no matter what they may say or show you publicly. Everything else is merely political theater. Well, I'm giving this little sideshow thumbs down. And no, the white media so-called news outlets are not shooting straight with you when it comes to these presidential polls. Presidential races are good business for the networks. They bring in plenty of ratings, and more importantly, they bring in ratings from the right kind of demographics that advertisers want to reach: affluent, educated, and white. So it's in the white media's interest to portray every presidential race as being some sort of horse race, even when it isn't. This is a huge part of why they simply didn't see the Trump victory coming back in 2016. And sure, the left corner of the white media had a huge open bias for Hillary Clinton because she's in the corner of the political machine that they're in, but they also have their narrative that every presidential race is a horse race, a nail-biter to the final minutes, even if it's not. They weren't about to say that they had serious doubts that Hillary Clinton could win, even when you had people like Michael Moore and others saying she's in serious trouble in those battleground states. And they also weren't about to say that Trump was the clear winner with the Electoral College even months out from the election when the evidence was mounting that he was the winner with the Electoral College. The white media's blind spot wasn't due to the Electoral College, though. It was due to their business model. Now keep in mind, the MSNBCs and CNN said that after Trump's criminal conviction, they would watch to see how his poll numbers dropped. Well, they've gone up, while Biden's have gone down. The convictions meant exactly nothing to his presidential hopes. How is Biden losing to the guy who's a professional BS artist with a ton of criminal convictions now and tried to overthrow the government? How does that happen? It happens when you adamantly refuse to offer anything to your own base. That's how. People have to be incentivized to turn out to the polls. And if you're not offering them anything, well, you can't count on them showing up just to vote against the other guy. That was the Democrats' entire strategy in 2020, and clearly they're trying to rerun the same play. But as I told you 4 years ago, that's a trick that only works one time, and they're learning that the hard way. Now, since Kamala's running the Obama playbook, you can bet that it's not going to be long before she starts banging the drum about her own pathetic version of, this is a historic first for America. There's going to be a first woman, first Asian American, first black woman place. She'll just be saying first, and thinking that that's going to be making people's hearts go pitter-pat. And of course, you'll have people in the Democrats and the white media's left corner saying that everyone needs to get on board the hype train for Kamala because this is going to be a historic first. They've been trying the Trump is Hitler line, and that's just not having any traction, so this is what they're going to be resorting to. You can bet on it. So we'll have the next few weeks with Democrats trying to convince the voters, especially the black ones, that this is a historic opportunity. Well, we heard the exact same cock and bull story from Barack Obama, and it was an opportunity. Only for him and his family. They were the only ones who got anything out of the Obama presidency. And that being the case, Obama can go ahead and support Kamala or anyone else that he wants. And it will end the same way it did when he endorsed Hillary in 2016, too. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Kenyari Ratliff Hossein, Josh Heath, Richard Griffith, Oscar Israel, and Pamela Hyman. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.